And again, greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the 1950 Radio Amateur's Handbook. And we're on Power Amplifiers, Chapter 3, Vacuum Tube Principles. So one thing that I think I'm discovering about myself when I'm studying stuff like this can get real complicated real quick, my mind is constantly looking for basic things, like basic statements about a certain topic. And in power amplifiers, they talk about a bunch of stuff, okay? And one of the things they talk about, let's just go over it a little bit here. In power amplifiers, output power rather than voltage is the primary consideration. Output power. And another thing, this is one of the common threads. In Chapter 2, they say, any source of power will deliver the largest possible output when the resistance of the load is equal to the internal resistance of the source, in this case, the vacuum tube. So the load and the resistance on the tube are the same, you get the maximum power. But then down here they go, actually, however, this is not the best case or operating condition because the use of such a relatively low value of load resistance generally results in more distortion than we want. For this reason, the load resistance of a power amplifier is usually 2 or 3 times more than the plate resistance. This represents a good compromise between distortion and power. And remember, distortion, they talked about that up here. Go operating point. This is perfect, no distortion. And then they talk about earlier in the earlier chapter where if this line isn't on a straight line, whatever they meant by that, the waveform of the amplified signal of this gets distorted. It gets all whacked out. And in this figure 311, they're showing a transformer coupled amplifier, just a basic, whatever this means. But, once again, you're seeing negative bias on the grid and you're seeing positive voltage on the plate and the output transformer and the load. So here's the resistance. And then there is the resistance on the plate. They're saying the elementary power output circuit, which the power consuming load is coupled to the plate through impedance matching transformer. It looks pretty simple, eh? They have Class A1 and Class A2 amplifiers. They talk about power amplification ratio. I'm just going to read it real slow. The power amplification ratio of an amplifier is the ratio of the power output obtained from the plate circuit to the power required from the AC signal to the grid circuit. There is no power lost in the grid circuit for an A1 amplifier. So such an amplifier has an infinitely large power amplification ratio. However, it is quite possible to operate a Class A amplifier in such a way that current flows in the grid for at least part of the cycle. And that's a Class A2 amplifier. Because we did talk about that earlier when we were talking about just the basic stuff about bias voltage and not allowing current to flow in the grid. But now they're talking about these two different situations where there is some current flowing in the grid or there isn't current flowing in the grid. And that's the basic idea between a Class A1 and Class A2 amplifier.
Cheese it, anyone?
Parallel and push-pull. So when 2 tubes are needed because 1 tube is not enough, you need power from 2 tubes. Parallel and push-pull. Here's a parallel circuit. Push-pull, parallel. So here's parallel. And one of the things in this one that they say is one of the common thread is the power output is proportional to the number of tubes used. And here's one of the keys here. The grid signal for exciting voltage required, however, is the same as for one tube. So you're telling me you can use the same grid voltage, what it would take for one tube for two of these suckers? I guess so. Here's the grid voltage, negative. Wait, where is it? Here it is. It's the same? I don't know. I guess that's what they say. I don't know. What the hell? And then they talk about also what a push-pull amplifier is. In this case, the grids and plates of the two tubes are connected to opposite ends of a balanced circuit. Okay. Oh, yeah. They are opposite ends of a balanced circuit. Neat. When the push-pull amplifier, it says in push-pull operation, the even harmonic second, fourth harmonics distortion is balanced out in the plate circuit. This means that for the same power output, the distortion will be less than with parallel operation. So less distortion in a push-pull than a parallel situation. Cascade amplifiers. This one is where in the chorus, it is of course thoroughly possible to take output power from one amplifier and apply it to the signal grid of a second amplifier, and the second amplifier to a third. Each amplifier is called a stage. And Class B amplifier, they're showing a push-pull circuit of a Class B amplifier and just waveforms, but just basically real quick in a Class B amplifier. If the grid bias, remember that's negative, is set at the point where no signal is applied, the play current is just cut off, then the signal can cause play current to flow in either tube. Only when the signal voltage applied to that particular tube is positive. Okay. Once again, some of the stuff flies right over my head, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is the grand finale in these different types of amplifiers and setups. But in a Class B amplifier is usually operated in such a way to secure the maximum possible power output. This requires that the grids be driven positive with respect to the cathode during at least part of the cycle, so grid current flows and the grid circuit consumes power. Oh, okay. So it's weird because up here they go, no, we don't want to consume power. And over here, yeah, we want to consume power. So I'm just saying, I'm going over the basic stuff, but there's a level of comprehension in what's going on here and what they're talking about that does require more time for me spending on this particular topic. So the 1950s Radio Amateur Handbook, they deliver a lot of information right away in some of these topics in power amplifiers. To me, it's a lot of shit right away. Boom, 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 Class A, Class B, push-pull, parallel, oh my God. And I'm just cruising through this like a book report, but I'm also trying to show you that the 1950s Radio Amateur Handbook is a gold mine of information, basic ideas, and theory on a lot of stuff, especially this on power amplifiers. So hope you enjoyed this little presentation. I'm sorry if I'm not better at explaining it, but I don't know anything about this shit. So just what I read and what I comprehend is what I'm trying to pass on to you folks. 73, have a goodie. CLG, I'm out of here.